Hi guys, Grapplers Academy back again. We got a different sort of a match for you today, not a straight up jiu-jitsu match. Something a little bit more interesting. If any of you guys have heard of combat jiu-jitsu, we're going to be looking at one of the finals matches from the lightweight match back in 2017.
Yeah, I think they had two tournaments running side by side for this. I think it was. There might have been middleweights and lightweights. It was a good tournament, to be fair. Some really, really good matches. And like I said, we both sort of enjoyed the rule set as well, with being open palm strikes to your opponent when one of you is going down. So it's not just you both have to be on the ground. As soon as somebody's on the mat or sort of like bum hits the floor or the back hits the floor, the strikes can start. And me and Bonn were talking about this the other day, how it's quite an effective way to train as well, especially being more aware of the self-defense side of things and more so of the actually not like sort of lying around in daft positions, really.
Yeah, I think like coming from an MMA background, being more into MMA before I started to transition into jiu-jitsu. When I'm playing jiu-jitsu, I still play with that mindset that strikes are a thing that can happen. And I don't know what your opinion on it is, but it seems like some jiu-jitsu guys play the game nowadays, and it is playing to the rules of the game, but they kind of play like strikes aren't an option. So some of the weird inversion sort of positions that you see, you're not really taking into account that somebody could start throwing punches, or if you're in a CJJ match, you've got the slaps as well. So I just think it's an important thing to kind of keep in mind and think about the origins of the sport and what it's for, or as a self-defense art as opposed to just a sport.
No, completely agree. Like, imagine trying to invert underneath somebody and just getting a full palm like across your nose and face. Like,
Yeah.
It's not going to be the most enjoyable experience, but it kind of makes you aware that some positions are purely for sport and some positions are actual effective in self-defense and restraining people, which
Definitely.
part of the sport, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could kind of argue that then it starts to play into the favour of guys who like to play a bit more top dominant position. Just in terms of having gravity on the side, you've got better leverage for the punching. But if you want to play that guard game, you've got to be pretty snappy in getting in on the position. You've not got a lot of time to hang around where your face is exposed and you're open for striking. Puts a little bit more emphasis on speeding the approach up with the attacks.
Oh, definitely. I think that's quite a nice segue into the styles of this match we've got today, because we've got Vagner Rocha, who had quite a good MMA background. He was 14-4, couple of fights in the UFC, Strike Force across various platforms. Nathan Orchard, I think he's had a few MMA fights, but he's very much of the 10th Planet system, where it's rubber guard, using the guard to minimize strikes, and he's also got his own sort of system that he's developed and named after himself, which unfortunately he doesn't really use in this match, which I kind of found quite funny.
Yeah, so for anybody who's not like super familiar with the different branches and factions of Jiu-Jitsu, 10th Planet is Eddie Bravo's like little group of guys, not a little group, these hundreds of schools globally, but 10th Planet is Eddie Bravo's stuff. And Eddie Bravo is pretty much famous for making that transition where everybody was doing a lot of gi into developing no-gi techniques, and famously saying himself that trying to develop no-gi techniques that are effective for grappling and for the UFC. Eddie Bravo always references himself having got into jiu-jitsu, having watched UFC, and everything that he's tried to develop off the back of that has been to try and improve the effectiveness of it in the context of mixed martial arts as well. So Nathan Orchard's kind of developing on that and developing on his rubber guard, and his technique with Dead Orchard is like the perfect example of what you would do if somebody who's in your closed guard, tying their upper body up and eliminating their arms to prevent any striking. Unfortunately, as you just said, he doesn't really utilize that in this match. There's a lot more play for legs and the positional side of it. So maybe just a little bit of not switching on to the context of the match. And this could be a good argument of thinking like, you've kind of got to train as you're going to aim to compete. if you're not training with that mindset of striking as a possibility, then you're going to default back to your patterns when you get into competition.
Well, definitely. You can sort of see where Wagner's MMA background comes in here. Like I've always been a big fan of Vagner, like especially with the way he sort of rolls, his constant forward pressure, his aggression in the matches. Like it's always great to watch, and it's very entertaining to watch. Like he's had some really good matches across the UBI series. He's been on Polaris a number of times. Like he's got really good matches with Ross Nichols and Benson Henderson on Polaris, which you can find on Fight Pass. And I'm not too clued up with Nathan Orchard, if I'm being honest with you, but he is a bit of an anomaly and hard to find on the internet, as me and Bonn found today, or not today, over the past few days, trying to do a bit more research into him. The only information we could really find was through his Instagram page, a little bit of information on his topology and on his club website. But
yeah, and that's not to say that he's not like quite a notable grappler. He's got a good run of wins and competition under his belt, but just not a lot about him out there on the internet to do research on. Like, also probably worth mentioning as well about Vagner is the success that he's had at ADCC over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
I think it was a bronze in 2017, which would have been in the summer before this tournament. And then he got a silver medal in 2019 at the ADCC, I think, losing to JT Torres in the final, which was a good match. But yeah, he's got a really aggressive style, Wagner. He likes to use a lot of hands in the face, pushing in the chest. And I've listened to him go into detail a couple of times on why he likes to use that, and feels like it's an effective system for baiting his opponents into doing stuff and getting reactions off them. So you kind of look at somebody who's a prototype for an athlete that would go well into combat jiu-jitsu, and you'd probably say that Vagner Rocha is right up there at the top. He kind of plays like a big, aggressive player, but he's a 70-kilo guy, and he's just got a great style for it, hasn't he? He's got famously his technique, which I know you and I both like to use on the rolling, which is the face mask or the python.
I remember must have been a couple of months ago now. I was at Cam's rolling, and I had someone's back and had one of their arms trapped. And somebody shouted across the room, "I'll give you a tenner if you face mask them." So me being the obvious nice guy that I am, I went straight for the face mask on them.
It's my favourite technique. I love it. If you can ever get anybody into that position, just even if that's not the thing that you want to finish the match with, just have a bit of a laugh there. Especially if it's in like training with your training partners, just cover the face up and just watch them panic a little bit. It's a great way for getting in under the neck to finish a rear naked choke, but I mean, it's probably one of the most degrading ways to spend a couple of seconds in a match. And if anybody's watching from the sides, they always get a good chuckle out of that one as well.
Oh yeah, and especially like while you're doing it, whisper into their ear, "You're not going nowhere now, mate."
Yeah, you can get as creepy as you like with that one, can't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. But sort of back to the sort of match, we sort of touched on Wagner's sort of aggression and his sort of constant forward pressure, and you see that quite strongly in the sort of throughout the whole of the match, and his stand up was quite prevalent with that as well. Constant forward pressure, heavy clubbing, and even when it goes out of bounds, when he's resetting, he fights to keep his position instead of start resetting sort of face to face.
Yeah, and I think that kind of plays out as a main theme of the match, especially in terms of the positional stuff that ends up happening throughout the match. There's a lot of kind of giving up of the back by Nate Orchard, isn't he? He bails out of positions and runs away. Normally, like if you're facing 99% of opponents, they're kind of just going to let you run away and just be happy with a basic reset. But Wagner chases him down.
Yeah,
he's not giving up anything. He's like, if you're going to give me your back, I'm going to take it.
That's it. And he's there for the win, and he's there to take it in a sort of dominant fashion. But I'd highly recommend anybody watching this to go back through and watch the sort of combat jiu-jitsu tournament. They've got a few of them on YouTube available, and they're really good watches, especially if you're quite new to grappling and you sort of don't just want to watch people rolling around trying to strangle each other. There's a few good stinging strikes on there, which will appease to sort of the combat sports fan.
Yeah, and I think importantly, probably just to finish off before we dive into the match, combat jiu-jitsu is a good idea. I think it's a good idea to train that way, and definitely an interesting concept. Jiu-jitsu is fun. Like, we can play jiu-jitsu and not necessarily have to worry about getting punched in the face like you do in MMA. And that's probably a big appeal to a lot of people getting into the sport. They look at MMA and think, I don't really want to get punched in the face that much, which is completely fair enough. Been there, done it. I'm not that keen to get punched in the face that much anymore. So jiu-jitsu is funny. You can be a little bit more creative and playful with your positions because you're not going to get heady strikes. But just bearing in mind that if you are going to plan on using jiu-jitsu in a self-defense scenario or strikes are available, it's just going to change the game a little bit. So just having that mindset is important.
Oh, definitely 100% agree with that. And off the back of that as well, I'd say if you get the chance, try rolling with strikes at least once a week or once a fortnight, just so you can sort of see where you're vulnerable, where certain techniques won't work, and how important certain positions are, as opposed to sort of like the certain transitions. So like in MMA, you'll find a lot of guys will strike down from half guard and 3/4 guard from like the top position, as opposed to going side control and even trying to take full mount. Can be quite detrimental to the striking game because of the position over the hips. But you'll find a lot of really good ground and pound players will sit in half guard and open up, and you'll sort of find a new way around the sort of the mats as opposed to just doing what you normally do.
Absolutely. Good guys, and we're back in with this first bit of the match here. So a couple of minutes of feeling each other out in terms of stand-up position, and nothing really has happened in this first minute or so of the match. It's just more of a feeling out process. Wagner's been using that pressure that we were talking about in the introduction to this match, giving a lot of pressure in the face, pressure in the chest. Orchard's giving the same back as well. There's a little sneaky eye poke in there at one point. So we'll kind of play through this beginning bit and have a look at the exchanges that they're giving on the feet.
Definitely. I think, like you said, Nathan Orchard's giving it as much as he gets with it in this exchange as well, into like he's trying to match the aggression, the forward pressure. One thing I'd sort of quite like as well is that outside elbow control that Wagner's going for. It's sort of use it to try and control the orientation of Nathan Orchard's posture, so you can sort of see it there with the tricep as well. So we're just going to go back briefly here so we can sort of have a look at it. So you can see it quite well here, where he's using this control to try and rotate and change the angle of Orchard's shoulders in comparison to his hips. And it's sort of, it's quite a dominant grip that he takes, and he uses it quite frequently throughout the match, I'm noticing. And it's kind of creates that reaction where if he is going to try and fight back and straighten up, it opens the hips up for a nice takedown as well. So I quite like this method here of clinching. It's sort of forward pressure. He's got great rutting as well. Like his forehead's constantly in contact with Nathan Orchard's. And he's trying to get that dominant position.
Yeah, another thing that I like about this, a little bit different from some of the matches that we've looked at over the past couple of weeks, has been involved a lot of collar tying and breaking posture down that way. And this is a different way of approaching it. So it's making a rotational breakdown of posture on the body rather than just directly affecting the breakdown of the spine. But yeah, as you said, like good head position ties into that as well. You can't have one without the other. You need those opposing forces. We've kind of just missed there by talking over it. The little bit of a slip through and back take that ended up happening. So let's dive back in and have a look at that.
So it kind of comes from a bit of a garb hold on it from Nathan Orchard, where he goes down and he's tried throwing a few strikes, but this ankle control here that Wagner's got really helps control the tempo of this sort of getting back up to his feet and exposing his back, which makes it readily available for Wagner to come in there and just wrap the waist up as he does in a second. But it's back to what we were talking about a few matches ago. I think it was Barnett and Lister. Was it where he's sort of lifting the heels up to make sure that he can't get off the floor, to get back to the floor?
Yeah.
Or it might have been Cron and Marcelo one, where basically keeping the feet elevated off the floor or stops them from being able to get back to the feet as easy or even at all. And keeping control of one leg, especially if someone's trying to run away from you, it gives you the distance and it gives you the control of the situation.
And kind of something that's important to note as a general principle as well, is like manipulation on different points of the limb. So we're right at the end of the limb here. He's going to have maximum leverage on it. If he was a little bit deeper up the limb, let's say he was behind and controlling him at the knee, he might not have as much control on manipulating his balance. Now, he'd probably have a tighter grip over the situation, but the balance from Nate Orchard would be better and he'd be able to mount a more effective single leg defense. Here you can kind of see it looks like he's about to fall over. Wagner's kind of like holding him up. If anything, he's trying to run away and he's trying to like reel him back into the situation. But typically, you're going to have more manipulation over a limb, and in this situation, a better control of the balance if you're at either end of it.
Yeah, and also as well on a defensive aspect as well, Orchard's known for sort of diving on the legs and jumping underneath, whereas here Wagner's not in that same level of danger with his legs. He's at a safe distance. He's still got contact, and Orchard's exposing his back. So the danger here is all in Orchard's position as opposed to where Wagner stands as well. As we sort of play it through, see how he dives through, and then as soon as he sort of dives and tries to roll away, a lot of players will sort of just let them get back to the feet and reset. Wagner, as we mentioned in the build-up, doesn't miss a beat here, and he's straight on the attack and trying to take control of the situation, which, for fair play to him, he's dictating the pace and he's dictating where the match goes.
Yeah, and in terms of like dominance of position, there's not much more dominant in a grappling match than having the back, and particularly when striking's involved. When you look at like the traditional hierarchy of dominance on positions in jiu-jitsu, typically they kind of referred to as having more options and having less options. So like a more dominant position, let's say like the back, for example, as the guy who's got your opponent by the back, you've got more options to go from there and your opponent's options are limited. And that's kind of like, would you say that that's got a bit of a tie-in as well to including striking in that? So like traditionally the more dominant positions of hierarchy would also be attributed to positions where you can more effectively strike from or less effectively strike from.
Yeah, like especially in this scenario and rule set where strikes are involved, and in an MMA sort of scenario, and where there'll be knees and kicks allowed, this would be a great position now to start attacking Orchard's legs with knees, especially with the anatomy of where the sciatic nerve runs down. You could do some sort of pretty nasty stuff to the legs and make them less effective throughout the match. But here you can sort of see he's got full control. He's less likely to get hit as well, Wagner here. So not only is he in a more effective place to try and strike and finish the match, but he's also in a position where he's less likely to get hit, less likely to get sort of struck, less likely to be under much threat. Like there's still threats there, just like any position, but the odds are stacked more in Wagner's favour here.
No, interestingly, going off the back of what we're saying there, this has gone into a reset in this position. Now, I think kind of what happens here with it being the reset and walking it back into the middle gives Nate Orchard a bit of time to think about what he wants to do next. Like ordinarily here, if this position was in the middle of the mat, I think Wagner would be going pretty much straight for a back take or a takedown or something like that. But because they end up walking it back into the middle of the mat, I think the next bit that we're going to go into is the part where Nate rolls through and tries and gets that knee bar. He's probably had time to think about that from walking out. He's like, right, what can I do from this position here? And, he's got that set of moves that he likes to go through where he's rolling through and coming in on the legs. So he's got time to process that coming back to the middle of the mat.
No, definitely. And we'll play it through now so we can sort of see how this sequence goes through and where the adjustment's coming from Nate. So you can sort of see the posture changes, the hip angle changes. And like you say, Orchard's had time to think. And he dives straight underneath and goes for that leg. Now, me, I've always found this leg positioning of Nate Orchard's quite interesting, where he's got control of the leg with his arms here, but then he's also got this leg pinning down the bottom leg, so Wagner's going to find it difficult to try and roll over and try and get out. And he's also controlling Wagner's back here with this leg, so it's a bit more difficult for him to try and posture up. Now, what Wagner's doing right here is this arm is digging in here, trying to control the hips of Nate Orchard's and trying to sort of minimize the ability for him to kind of extend and start to roll over and really get a bite on the leg that he's attacked. We'll just play through a bit more here. You can sort of see the angle that he starts taking here, and he's already got Wagner's leg pretty tightly wrapped up. He's got this leg coming round to isolate and control the hip. He's got his hips quite high above Wagner's knee, possibly even on Wagner's knee. And he's got control of the heel here as well. So Wagner's leg is less likely to be able to stand backwards and rebase. And there's a lot of pressure going down through Wagner's knee here, where if applied in the right manner, could cause some pretty big damage to the knee, really.
Yeah, it's almost on the verge of hyperextension already there, isn't it? And kind of interestingly, looking at the hand position, the way that Nate Orchard's got Wagner's leg tied up, it kind of almost looks like he's going for a heel hook with the way that he's trying to keep the toes up in the armpit. But because the heel is in the elbow and not down at the wrist, it's going to be a much less effective way on that. But the hip pressure going in is pretty horrific here, and I think it leads to this first takedown of the match, and just kind of pops that leg through and extends it and sits him right down. Now, I don't know whether the fact that his hips were a little bit below the knee line there kind of led to it being a little bit less damaging takedown, because that position there could be quite exposing on the knee with the hyperextension.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think, as you said, sort of at the weight here, maybe part of the decision to go down was Wagner's as well, to try and help hide the knee and buy him some more time. Because like I said, he looks like he's a little bit below the knee line, but he's still high enough to apply a good amount of pressure there. And he could arguably send his hips higher up here, just to readjust himself. But also, if you look at the way that Orchard sort of orientates his body for the fall, he starts wrapping himself around and pulling the knee further through. So it's almost kind of like a mutual decision, but the fall kind of benefits Wagner more, because now he's got more tools to start escaping. And if we watch where this leg goes next, it goes straight onto his hips to start trying to mount the escape and start to create the distance between the knee line and the hips.
Yeah, there's some nice defense here, isn't there? And it's a pretty immediate response to the takedown. And as you quite rightly said, he comes down and maybe thinks that going with the pressure that Nate Orchard's putting towards his knee is the best option. But what we can see, which is really nice, is that knee bar was pretty tight and it was a good effective takedown. But Wagner goes straight for a toe hold. And pretty much as soon as he wraps up that foot, Nate lets go of any sort of knee bar or foot or leg lock that he's got going on and starts to defend and try to escape himself. So I'm going to guess that wasn't the most comfortable position for him to be in, considering that he made the adjustment immediately to try and get out of it.
Yeah, no, definitely. You can sort of see as well the torque that's going through the knee. Definitely think that falling to the mat benefited Wagner here more than Nathan, though. And then as we sort of progress forward, like one thing I just noticed now is Orchard's face where Wagner puts on the toe hold. Now, there's no sort of easing into it and sort of trying to see what happens. Soon as the pressure goes onto the foot, there's a grimace there straight away. And you can tell he's thinking about something else other than that knee bar.
Yep. Straight from attack, immediately onto defence.
And then they go back to the feet. But if we just look at it, go back to the hand positioning of Vagner just before they go back to the feet, it didn't look like the strongest toe hold position. Now we look at it at this angle. Here we go.
There must have been just enough in it to give Nate something to think about.
Oh, definitely. But like having the sort of the fingertips wrapped around the end of the foot, it's not like both like being in that position that Wagner's in, like both of us before, we kind of know that it's not going to do any long-term damage to the ankle, that kind of toe hold, but there's probably enough pressure for him to think about something else other than attacking your leg, really, there, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. There definitely is kind of like a hierarchy of damage in terms of differences between leg locks and knee bars. It's kind of almost like the stuff without the rotation that's going to manipulate anything that's going on around the knee. You'd consider to be like the highest, the most damaging stuff. So like your inside heel hooks and those sorts of twisting, torquing motions. But the straight foot locks and the knee bars, although damaging, they're not going to cause as much structural damage to the joints.
Yeah, like I've had my ankle pop a couple of times from a toe hold and have it flare up, but it's easier to come back from that than it is coming back from a knee injury. So yeah, I think definitely look at the hierarchy of injury from submissions and also the risk versus reward of certain submissions. I think Wagner kind of got a little bit lucky with this counter attack. Now that I've looked at it in a bit more detail, because I do think that there was a few adjustments that Nate Orchard could have made to make that a lot deeper and a bit more damaging for Wagner.
Yeah, you could potentially argue there that maybe somebody with a different player might have been more comfortable in that position and just continued on with their attack, or made an adjustment in the series of movement leading up to this attack that could have potentially ended the match here.
Oh, definitely. But this results in them sort of getting back to their feet, and again, more of this sort of wrestling where he's jumping up and just trying to take him down from here. Now, the takedown I really appreciate here as well. So a lot of people, it looks like he's just sort of dragged and fell. But if we look at the angle that he's on, like obviously he jumps on his back here and it's a bit of a failed back take. But it puts him in a great position here for sort of more of a drag down takedown. Now, if we look at this, all of Wagner's weight is driving down towards the mat. He's very light in his feet. And Orchard's starting to fall in this direction as well. And this is all due to sort of Wagner's sideways pressure. And it's not just a trip and fall, it's a calculated sort of body lock, angling your body weight over and collapsing. Because look, if you look where his knee goes, here he's blocking Orchard's leg from taking another step. And that's Orchard's lifeline there to getting his base back. And as soon as he starts to go, Wagner goes down with him. But again, he's like Orchard straight on the attack, which is what I find great about this match. Like they're both back and forth with counter attacks and constantly moving forward pressure. And one goes, the other one goes straight back and has an answer.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to a point that you made a little bit earlier on in the match as well, in terms of the importance of rotational force in jiu-jitsu and grappling in general. It's not always just about straight lines, snap downs, blast doubles, which are all effective, but the rotational pressure that you can apply to the shoulders, and in this case the hips, to manipulate your opponent is massively important.
Yeah. And they sort of end up in a bit of a scrambly position. But Wagner's hip control really sort of keeps himself safe here. And those strikes onto the back, like, he's hitting him with the butt of his palm first, and that's I'm feeling him, to be fair.
We were talking about this the other day, weren't we? You know, we've seen a bit of an adjustment here to make an attempt on the leg, but those strikes, if you're curling the fingers back, it might look like an old self-defense instructional where you're coming up in under the nose, but you curl your hand back like that, you can generate a lot of force, and actually probably more force than punching with a closed fist, because you're going to be taking less damage striking like that. But what we were saying, which was interesting, was I'm just kind of getting like quite high up on the rib cage. Now, if you wanted to cause the maximum damage to the guy on the receiving end of the strikes here, we were kind of saying it'd be more effective to get in underneath that floating rib.
Yeah. Really, literally take the wind out of him.
And you can definitely quite easily break a couple of ribs by doing that as well.
Yeah. I think doing this as well, rather than a sort of tactic to sort of try and deliver damage off, I think this might have been a tactic to more sort of buy himself some time. Because like watching this, I think it's quite a good way to sort of watch of how Vagner defends the leg attack here as well. As he's keeping his leg straight, so Nate can't extend himself and separate the foot from the body as much. But also, as we progress through it a little bit, he changes his hand positioning to start grip fighting with Nate Orchard. As you can sort of see him there, he's pulling the elbow, so it's very hard for him to try and drive the weight through. But as Nate's sort of trying to adjust himself here, the hand comes through the middle, and he's starting to have a wrist fight here. So he's coming under to control the wrists. You see where he goes through the middle in a second. So he's going through to control the wrist here, which stops and helps inhibit Nate's ability to get underneath him, which that's a nasty leg attack already there.
Yeah, I think he made a good adjustment that wasn't there on the first knee bar, or wasn't quite there as much. So maybe the realization from that first attempt in the previous sequence going into this one is getting the hip position above the knee line. Yeah. And we talked about this in our previous podcast as well in quite a lot of detail, and breaking down the importance of hip position and top and bottom limb control on the legs. But the way that he's able to shoot up and get up onto his shoulders to elevate the hips up and above the knee on this one is probably the key factor in terms of where he's able to rotate and come through on a more effective knee bar. If he was still below the knee with his hips, any rotation or manipulation on the joint that he would have made would have been nowhere near as effective. But actually comes out in quite a nice position here. But again, Vagner does a good job of defending and rotating with it in order to escape.
I think as well, one thing that's worth noting here is the way that Nate adjusts his pressure that he's applying, because at the moment he's trying to extend and lengthen Wagner's leg, where he's sort of fighting Wagner's grips and also his hamstring. But as we sort of progress through, you sort of see where he changes the angle of his attack here. And rather than trying to extend and fight the muscle groups, he rotates and causes a collapse of Wagner's hip, which, for anyone who's been in this position and had tried to fight someone extending the leg, fighting someone extending the leg while you're in a vulnerable and sort of rotated position is a lot more difficult to do. And you can sort of see the difference in the ease here now that Nate has in rotating because Wagner's base is off, and then going in to extend the leg to attack that knee.
And again, kind of just does a good job of confirming what we were just previously talking about a couple of minutes ago in terms of the power and the effectiveness of rotational pressure on the body. The joints typically are designed to go in straight lines in the direction of which they hinge. So you're generally going to meet a lot of resistance there on the defending end. But when you start applying that rotational power, that's where you can start to break the strong joints down and get away from the strong muscles and get to the weaker tendons and the weaker muscles.
Mm. And like I say, going back to the sort of weaker muscles and the stronger muscles here, you can sort of see how Nate's leveraged that to his favour by when he's got himself in his back here and he's got Vagner loaded up on his hamstrings and his glutes. And then all it takes now is Wagner's weights through his hands. And all Nate has to do now is just extend his legs and his hips to now then start to rotate and get into this knee attack here. Again, which you can see where his hips are in relation to his knee. And even just how high it is off the mat. There's some pressure going through that knee, I think.
That's kind of reminded me, that's still that you had that on there, has reminded me of that Meow versus Rotullo brother match in the ADCC where he looks like he's ripping his foot off, like he's going to take it home with him. And whichever Meow brother is, I can't remember, is kind of just sat there with the nonplussed look on his face like, leg locks don't work, bro.
Yeah. So you ain't going to get this. And then you get to Vinny Magalhaes on the weekend and you have no knee left.
Yeah, but they don't work.
No, they don't. Neither do his knees. But I think looking at how Wagner sort of escapes this, like it's the rotation and the constant moving that helps him. So it stops Nathan Orchard from being able to really settle into the position. Now, when I'm coaching leg locks and stuff, I don't advise rotating to escape as you're asking to rip your own knee. But what Wagner does here is effective in escaping. But disclaimer out there, if someone's got hold of your foot and you're trying to rotate your hips, avoid it for now, as you're likely going to injure yourself and then probably try and blame your training partner for holding on for too long when it was your movement that caused the injury. But
that's probably like an important point to talk about as well, really, isn't it? That we've not ever mentioned, or maybe it's kind of a bit of a unspoken rule in the gym with your training partners, especially your more preferred training partners. But it should be something that's in place with everybody. Like there should be that level of consent and safety when you're rolling, isn't it? It's like, especially with the leg lock stuff, like you both know, and there's an agreement between you that one person's not going to absolutely slap a submission on. You might go 95% of the way there, but that last little bit of the submission, you're going to give your partner a little bit of playing room. Yeah. Nobody wants to injure each other in the training room, but the responsibility goes both ways. And just because your training partner, if they've got you in a sub and taking it all the way up to the point of finishing and they're giving you a little bit of room to play with, doesn't necessarily mean that you should start spazzing out. You know, you've kind of got to respect what they're doing there as well. And there's that agreement that they're giving you a bit of room to play and work with it, but it works both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's sort of like if you're playing with somebody who's quite well versed with leg locks and they do enjoy playing them, have trust in them that they're not going to crank it on. Like if they're not going to crank a choke onto you or crank an armbar or a Kimura, they're not going to crank a leg lock onto you. Like there are people out there who will crank submissions on during a roll, even just like sparring in the gym. Tap early with them lot, or don't try to avoid getting yourself into a vulnerable position. Or if you're not quite ready for it, don't roll with them. Like simple as that. But take the responsibility on yourself for how you conduct yourself when you're in a vulnerable position. I've had it before where I've been rolling and I've got an entry on the leg and I can see in their eyes where they're about to just wig out and start spinning. And I've just abandoned ships, let go of everything and let them move to escape and then kind of bollocked them afterwards because I'm not being responsible for somebody else's injury. But don't spin out. Like, just have trust in your training partners. Yeah,
it can kind of take a while to get to that, can't it? But definitely something that you should look to put in place, like straight from the beginning of your training career.
Yeah, sort of get used to being calm in uncomfortable situations. Like Bonn said, it can take a while to get there, but having that awareness and sort of confidence and trust in your training partners as they're there for the same purpose as you. Just sort of try roll and practice safe, and that's defensively and offensively. But back to this, there's quite an interesting position coming up in a minute, isn't there, where Vagner gets a really, really good, kind of almost like a gift wrap position from top half guard.
Yep, really nice.
So what we're going to do, we're going to get that bit queued up, and then we'll bring back into the footage.
So kind of back into this match here now. With I'd say the next most important phase in the match really is where we've gone through another exchange on takedowns. Wagner's had the back a couple of times, but we've ended up back down on the mat where we're ending up in a half guard position, and this ties in with back what we were talking about in the introduction to this match, the importance of the dominance of half guard in striking when striking is involved. Like you kind of see this position favoured a lot by MMA guys. Especially when the cage is there as well, because we can kind of like where Nate Orchard's back would be, MMA guys like to pin that back up against the wall, gives the guy limited options to escape. Of course, he can start standing up, but the benefit of having the half guard is that bottom leg's pinned, and that's pretty much going to be the one that's going to allow you to start scooting up and climbing up the cage. But we'll go through this bit now, and we'll kind of see that Wagner does a good job of pinning the leg down here, but does a really good job of manipulating the wrist and the arm that's on top. And putting it into what you consider or say is like a gift wrap position from the front, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like the position you can sort of get from like S mount or even side control, where it's a really, really controlling position to be in. You can see Nate struggling to defend defend himself here. He's got the bottom hip pinned, like he said, with the half guard, and he's got a really, really strong like cross wrist control here.
This is a pretty nasty position, isn't it? Like a fight could get stopped from this position if you were relentless with the striking there, because your opponent's not got a lot of option for defending and covering up. Of course, you've got the options where you can kind of look to free the leg up and come through to head and arm triangle chokes. But I think the important thing to note on this match is that Wagner is enjoying punching or slapping Nate in the face. I don't think there's anybody out there that doesn't enjoy a little bit of slap jitsu, but this is a good example of like Wagner's on top. He's got a really super dominant position. That arm's pinned, and that rotational pressure on the shoulder is really difficult to get out from, which is why it's such an effective dominant position from the top. See there that free arm of Nate Orchard's the left arm, the bottom arm can't really do a lot to defend the punches. It kind of like pulls it up in the air, but doesn't really do a lot. Wagner's having a pretty easy time at working his way around that. But having said that, Nate does a good job of recovering the guard in a second, but probably spend a little bit more time talking about this position because it's a super controlling and important position. Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, definitely. Like one thing that I like here is the elbow control as well that Wagner's got. So he's got this elbow driving pressure into the spine, so it kind of helps stop Nate from extending out of this as well, which is going to do a good job in basically controlling him, the ability to keep the head where it is so he can constantly apply strikes. And Wagner's driving downward pressure into Orchard's ribcage as well. So this is going to affect his breathing. It's going to create a bit of panic. And so the arm was positioned across the face a couple of times as well, which again is going to have a knock-on effect with Orchard's breathing, which anyone who's been underneath someone heavy and unable to breathe creates a lot of anxiety. And it creates a lot of panic and wastes a lot of energy on the defending person.
I've heard in Wagner's like benefit area as well from a lot of big players. Like Cyborg is one of his main training partners, isn't he? He says he feels like a really heavy guy. Like he's got a lot of pressure from the top. So for Cyborg, he's a big 100-kilo guy. For him to be saying that when Wagner's putting that pressure on somebody who's overweight, that must feel like a hell of a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I think one thing that Wagner didn't really anticipate here was Orchard recovering guard, because you can sort of see by the way he's talking his hips here that he's putting a lot of pressure through the bottom leg and possibly doing a good job tying it up. But there's a nice little gap here, which Orchard takes advantage of shortly to get his guard back and get back on the offense. which we'll phase into in a second. But if you're in this position and you're grappling, use it as it's a very effective for passing as well, as you can force them to sort of extend in this way here, as you send your trapped knee through this gap here as well in a bit of a baseball slide motion. So if you find yourself here and there's no strikes involved, it's a great position to go for a pass, step over to mount, and then progress to further positions to then potentially take the back and finish with a choke or a head and arm choke. But as we sort of progress here, sort of cue this bit up where you see Orchard sort of slide his knee through the middle in a second. So his hips are going to come underneath and his knee's going to come through this gap here where he starts to put Vagner into his close guard.
He's not really got a lot of other options, has he? So he's kind of data crunching and analysing what's available here, and manages to start wiggling his hips free and does a really good job of switching his hips out into the space that you just identified there, retaining the close guard. I've still got that arm wrapped around his head, which is uncomfortable, but he's in much better position now for particularly not from getting strikes, and it just gives him that option of pulling Wagner's posture down into him like he's doing here in that close guard, which again is going to stop him from striking. And what he's not got at the moment is that free arm. But looking at his training background, like this is traditionally where those 10th Planet guys would start to look to apply that rubber guard defense. It's a really effective way of breaking down the posture and taking the arms out of the equation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think Wagner's quite clued up with that aspect of things, and this is where you can sort of see straight away he's already planning on standing up in the guard and trying to work past it. Oh, I think that's jumped past a little bit.
It looks like he inverts on a nice little K-guard entry there, doesn't he, on the leg?
Yeah. And you can sort of see Wagner straight away, he's up. He tries to jump under, just as Bonn said there, with a K-guard entry. But like I said, his hips were a little bit too low for it, and he's just a little bit slow to the reaction, whereas if he would have got his hips to his knee, sent this leg over the top, and sort of clamped onto Wagner's hips, he'd have got a better bite on it, and he would have been able to really disrupt Wagner's base and continue his attack.
I think also what's important there as well is Wagner sees what's going on pretty much straight away, and as soon as that other leg comes over and the pressure off the hand that's needed to keep the clamp down on that leg, he just steps back, doesn't he? Like the leg comes over, he identifies it straight away and steps back, and he's almost immediately out of the position again.
Yeah, you can sort of see that straight away, yeah. Steps up and back and comes through. And as we referred to before, Wagner's giving no space. You can see straight away he's diving back on top of him while Orchard's trying to retreat. He's giving no space. He's giving no time to think. He's got Orchard on the defence the majority of the match here. And they end up back into sort of a guard situation. But looking at where Wagner's hips are and how low he is, Orchard's trying to get off some 10 Planet techniques. But Wagner's doing a great job here of creating the pressure, pushing forward, and essentially forcing Orchard to disengage there.
Yeah, it's a good little exchange, isn't it? Like a different battle of opposing styles is probably a good way to phrase it. Like that aggressive style versus somebody who's more inclined to play guard and look for the legs. Just it's a good match, isn't it? This is a really fun match.
Really fun match to watch. And it sort of makes me sort of miss rolling even more now.
But I think the next bit in the match that we're going to look at is the final part on the exchange. So is there anything else you want to touch on this, or should we get that queued up and look at how this match finishes?
Yeah, so like between now and then, there's a bit more of a stand-up exchange between the two of them. Wagner does get into mount at some point to start applying strikes, but Orchard does a great job to escape. But we're going to sort of look onto the finishing sequence as Wagner sort of kind of learns from how Nate escapes and adjusts his posture and positioning to then get back into a strong position to finish the match. So Okay, so we're looking here now at the sort of finishing sequence. Wagner's in a familiar position, just minus the half guard, where he's got this elbow control pinching the hips. He's got doing a great job applying downward pressure into Orchard's sort of rib cage as well, and taking away a lot of space. We can see Orchard sort of sneaking his hand through to trying to escape, but it's kind of like the beginning of the end here now for Orchard. The difference in tactics here that we sort of noticed overlooking the whole match is, there's not really a point where Orchard actively fights to get to the top position, whereas it's a position that Vagner is actively seeking, actively looking for, and he stays there and he knows how to stay there and get back there. Whereas I think it's a bit of a alien concept for Nathan at this point. And you can sort of see it in the way that he's attacking the legs a lot. He's comfortable on his back. He's trying to recover guard. I don't really notice a sense of urgency in him trying to get back on top to get to a dominant position here.
It's probably the biggest difference between their overriding styles, one fighter to another, isn't it? And all credit to Nate Orchard getting to the final in this tournament, but like an MMA player's style of jiu-jitsu for a combat jiu-jitsu tournament is going to be drastically different from somebody who's got more of an emphasis on the legs, guard pulling, trying to play off the back. Doesn't really play into your benefit when there's striking involved. You see a lot of guys in MMA matches that are quite comfortable to kind of like take a soft punch and lay on the back and try and invite people in to playing in the guard. It doesn't really work. It's not super effective when strikes are involved because you've got the choice of whether you engage or disengage. And it's kind of quite interesting when we've looked at other matches, and we were having a chat about the Submission Underground match this weekend, and a couple of the matches on the card there with Richie Martinez. It was a bit of that battle of wrestling versus guard play, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where Richie was trying to invite him into that guard play, and there just wasn't the willingness there to engage. But when he's striking involved, or it's MMA, it's a different matter altogether. But yeah, top positions, you've got to say when he's striking involved that it's always going to be preferable to be side control top than bottom. You don't want to be underneath. There's just way more options.
Definitely. We can sort of see now as Wagner starts to move around, he's laying down strikes, he's controlling Orchard's hips there with his hand. Orchard's still looking for that leg, and he's still trying to dive underneath. And you can just sort of see Wagner's just slowly grinding him down, applying that pressure. And as soon as he finds an opening, steps over to mount. Now, this mount here is quite interesting. If we take it back just before he bucks, he's purposely put a foot inside Orchard's legs. Now, this helps control the hips. And as he starts to sort of progress through, Nathan Orchard may take that as an invitation to grab hold of the leg, which will put him in a position called 3/4 guard, which minimizes the bridge, keeps his hips trapped, and it puts Wagner in a much better position to apply dominant and powerful strikes. Now, Orchard bucks and bridges here, but Wagner's quick to sort of respond, then he keeps his leg inside there. Now, as Orchard tries to sort of separate the leg there, he's quick to respond, and he gets hit in the face, like pretty much straight away, almost as a sort of, yeah, that's not going to work this time, mate. And he keeps him pinned now, and he keeps him on his side. Like, Wagner's knees are clamping and pinching, and Orchard made the mistake of rotating his hips and allowing him to get sandwiched between Wagner's legs.
This is what's interesting, isn't it? Like if that was a normal jiu-jitsu match and he started diving in underneath and looking for the legs there, it probably would have worked. Like, it might not have necessarily worked 100% of the time, but you would have had a lot higher percentage chance of getting in on that leg. But as soon as your face is there and you're not doing anything with your hands to try and defend, you're going to get slapped in the face. Just be aware of what game you're playing, and like the rest of the way this plays out, that book that he does is pretty much the only defense that he tries to mount when Wagner's mounting him. You know, you could go on YouTube now and look at mount defense, and probably the first thing that would pop up is a Gracie breakdown. Henna and the boys over at Gracie University would tell you how to start defending this straight away. But it's like kind of jiu-jitsu basics 101, isn't it? It's almost the first thing that you'd learn in terms of a defense when somebody's mounting you.
Yeah.
Doesn't really seem to be a lot of it going on there. Like, what's the one thing that you're told never to do is just kind of like stick your arms up and I don't know what this is doing. There's no bridging. There's no attempt to control posture. Like, no booking to try and get him to put his hands on the floor. I wouldn't want to be on my back getting slapped in the face there, but he kind of seems quite content to take it.
Oh, definitely. I think we got to take into consideration as well is it's his third or fourth match of the night as well. He's 7 minutes into the final, and he's just basically survived an onslaught of Vagner's attacks so far, where he's coming in, and again, Wagner's got this ankle inside of his thighs. Again, it sort of helps negate the bridge. It controls the hips. And if Nathan Orchard takes the bite for that and tries to put himself into sort of a half guard, he's going to put himself in a worse position. And we can sort of see as he's progressing, Wagner's ability to sort of ride the bridge and sort of really just keep that constant pressure going forward. I think it was time for... Yeah. I think it was more pride there that stopped the tap more than anything.
Yeah, the walrus of referee MMA dived in there with a nice save, didn't he? There's a couple of memes floating around about that this whole series as well, which is quite funny. It's like when your little brother takes the TV remote and starts changing the channel.
What? No.
And Mike Beltran's the mum coming in to split it up.
Thing is, I really do appreciate that beard and mustache. That's memorable. That's like a top quality. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether I've got the commitment to try and quite take it that far, if I'm honest.
Oh no, I'm in agreement there. Like,
as this beard gets grabbed in training, like if anybody's going for geese in training, they're just getting a big clump of this beard, and it's not even that long. So I can imagine that he's kind of got to tie it up out of the way there, or tuck it inside his rash guard or something.
What he does, he puts it over the top, so it's like the illusion of having hair.
Yeah, I think I'll leave that for now. I'm considering trimming this as it is, to be honest, because it's a pain in the ass when we're back on the mats. But yeah, I just like combat jiu-jitsu. It's fun. It makes jiu-jitsu violent again.
Yeah, no, definitely. Was it the old Henzo meme with make jiu-jitsu violent again? Yeah,
I like that. Yeah,
we'll have to try and get that up there on the page for those that haven't seen it.
But yeah, I mean, like, go dive into the comments on this one. Let us know if you want us to cover any more of the combat jiu-jitsu matches, because it puts a different spin on it, and it's an interesting concept to bear in mind, isn't it?
No, definitely. And I think for those that haven't rolled with any sort of strikes, even if it's just like small MMA gloves and just sort of pitter-patter strikes, it adds a whole different dynamic to your rolling and the way you look at positions. And if anything, your game will benefit from it. Like, you'll generate much better top control. You'll be able to sort of find where you can rest a lot easier. You'll find new pockets of positions which you might not necessarily have thought about because you've not had the need to stay there to land strikes.
Yeah, definitely. It works both ways, doesn't it? Because you can kind of figure out, like you say, where you can buy that pressure from the top and which is most effective in terms of control and dominance, but also from the bottom as well. You know, not getting comfortable in positions where, you might just be happy to lay there to get your breath back, or like put yourself in a vulnerable position that might not necessarily translate over that well into a real life situation with striking. But it's just an interesting concept overall, and don't get us wrong. If you've not done jiu-jitsu with strikes before, or you've not got an MMA background, it doesn't have to be quite as violent as what you've just seen there. It's more of a case of just like tapping your opponent to let them know. So if you've got gloves on, kind of just tapping them with it, or even if you've not got gloves on, just using an open hand, and more so like touching them, like tapping them on the head rather than it's not striking, is it? When you're training, you got to look after your training partners.
Yeah, you still got to train smart with it. It's just adding another element to it. And for me as well, like when you get the guard pass and someone turtles up, especially with strikes, I'm like, this ain't no safe position still.
Yep.
And just ride them, heavy pressure, and just sort of let them be aware that turtle's not a safe position, which is another little pet peeve of mine when you see it in some places where it's sort of like, all right, we're just gonna sort of wait for them to turn over or let them pull guard again. It's like, nah. Yeah. That's a conversation for another day.
I mean, you could take that to the extreme and look back on some of the old pride fights. If somebody was just turtled up in a pride fight, you're probably going to get your head soccer kicked into the crowd.
Or was it Shogun Hua who was doing the volley kicks to the rib cage?
Yeah, I don't want to sit there and turtle and let that happen.
No, not at all. But yeah, as Bonn said, get in the comments and let us know what you want to see from us. We're happy to take suggestions for matches, any other aspects of the sport you want us to focus on. But yeah, thank you for listening. Anything you want to add to that one?
No, absolutely. Go give us some info to dive deep on. We've been enjoying it so far. Definitely open to looking at different aspects of the match. Like I enjoyed doing this today, so we'll definitely be covering some more combat jiu-jitsu matches in the future. Yeah, go and let us know. Give us your feedback. We're enjoying it. Go check us out on the social media pages. Yeah, and I can't wait to get back on the mats. But this is doing us a world of wonders for now.
Oh, definitely. And don't forget to subscribe and share as well. Thank you.